In World War II, some nations famously bet their survival on static concrete. By ranking these defensive lines from worst to best, we will evaluate whether they were catastrophic industrial blunders or ultimate weapons of attrition. The least successful fortification in our list is the Maginot Line. It successfully achieved its goal of deterring a direct assault, yet failed to prevent the defeat of France. Overseen by the Corps, this project was intended to compensate for a lack of manpower by sealing the border with 1.5 million cubic meters of concrete. France aimed to force a German detour. Engineering-wise, these were self-sufficient underground systems rather than simple bunkers with concrete up to 3.5 m thick to resist heavy artillery. They featured over a 100 km of tunnels. France's lower birth rate following World War I reduced the pool of potential conscripts, necessitating a shift toward fixed defenses. Tactically, the defenses were flawless, boasting a 100% success rate against frontal assaults. The Maginot Line's defense in depth utilized large and small and blockhouse, which proved incredibly resilient. Yet paradoxically, the line reduced the effectiveness of French army due to an overreliance on static systems. The Maginot mindset led to complacency, reducing readiness in mobile units and other operational areas. Despite its tactical strength, the line had zero resilience to strategic counters. Leaders fatally assumed the Ardennes forest was impenetrable to mechanized armies, leaving it lightly defended. This created a critical gap along the French-Belgian border. Financially, the project consumed over 6 billion francs or up to 9 billion USD today, yet failed to prevent defeat. Next up at number 5, the Fortress Singapore represents one of the most dramatic collapses in military history. It showed how a reputedly unbreakable defense can disintegrate when strategic assumptions meet reality. Singapore was the linchpin of the British defense network in Southeast Asia. By December 1941, 29 large coastal guns were operational, including the massive 15, in batteries at Johor and Buona Vista. But while the defenses at Fort Kennett and Changi were formidable, the design harbored a critical flaw. Singapore lacked serious landward defenses to protect the northern coast. The Fortress Singapore was designed to host the main British battle fleet. However, it relied on a flawed assumption that the dense jungle of Malaya was impassable. Contrary to the persistent myth, some of the coastal guns could fire landward, and they actively engaged Japanese forces at northern shore. But they didn't have enough high explosive shells. Despite vastly outnumbering the Japanese forces of roughly 80-0 to 30-0, fixed defenses created a false sense of security and overconfidence within the high command. The Japanese executed a perfect counter tactic and performed a landward attack. In a 70-day lightning campaign, the Japanese forces traversed the impassable jungle and landed on the northern shores of Singapore. Financially, the project was funded by substantial investments, including donations from the Sultan of Johor, but it offered poor combat value, resulting in immediate and complete surrender. In fourth place, the Atlantic Wall was a fortification of immense scale, but uneven strength, spanning from Norway to the Spanish border. This fortification was a catastrophic strategic misallocation of the Third Reich's dwindling resources. Initiated by Hitler's Directive No. 40 in 1942, this was a massive coastal defense that consumed 11 million tons of concrete and 1 million tons of steel to fortify 3.0 m of shoreline. Construction followed the Regal-Bau system, resulting in nearly 10.0 permanent concrete bunkers with walls up to 3.5 m thick along the French coast alone. The Wehrmacht established 343 batteries with nearly 1,400 guns costing over 3.7 billion Reichsmarks. The project heavily relied on decoy positions to mislead reconnaissance. Under Rommel, the defenses were significantly enhanced with layered obstacles like Belgian gates, Czech hedgerows, and Rommel's asparagus. Defenses averaged 2 mi in depth, incorporating strategic flooding and 6.5 million mines. By organizing resistance nests into larger puncta, the system allowed static infantry units to inflict heavy casualties on battle-hardened Allied divisions. Despite many defenses had protected sea, mates and integrated anti-tank walls, the Atlantic Wall was still vulnerable to Allied naval bombardment. While it delayed the invention until June 1944 and exacted a high cost, it ultimately failed to prevent Allied landings. Breaking into our top three is the fortification many wrote off. Germany's Siegfried Line or West Wall was no technological marvel, but it was an effective grindstone constructed between 1936 and 1939 under Fritz Todt. This wasn't a single line, but a defense and depth system stretching 630 km from Cleve to Weil-Rhein with 14,800 fortifications built. Its engineering was standardized and robust, such as B-work bunkers that featured 5 m thick concrete and camouflaged as civilian houses. Externally, the terrain was denied by 8 ft deep anti-tank ditches and 3 staggered rows of dragoon teeth. Mothballed in 1940, the West Wall was reactivated in 1944 using 20-0 forced laborers. Its objective was to bleed Allied forces to buy time for mobile German counterattacks. In the Hürten forest, the West Wall proved horrifyingly effective. The dense terrain neutralized Allied advantages, leading to over 33,000 US casualties over 2 months. The West Wall acted as an excellent force multiplier, granting 10:1 ratio advantage in certain sections. By spacing pillboxes for mutual supporting fire, the Germans forced the Allies into costly frontal assaults. Countering the Siegfried Line was slow and costly. The integration of anti-tank ditches and dragoon teeth stalled tank movements. Compared to the Maginot Line, the Siegfried Line was more efficient due to its modest pre-work costs. It successfully protected the German industrial heartland for months and inflicted heavy casualties. A runner-up and the most effective defensive line in Europe is the Gustav Line, stretching 100 to 150 mi from the Tyrrhenian to the Adriatic. This was the backbone of the German winter lines built as a network of converted stone farmhouses and fortifications. The Germans integrated advanced weaponry with natural terrain. The defense featured concrete pillboxes, dugouts, and even panther turrets and panther nests embedded in the earth. The line was anchored by Monte Cassino, a steep 1,700 ft hill crowned by a 6th century Benedictine monastery. This position provided commanding observation over the Lieri Valley. For 6 months, the Gustav Line halted the Allied advance, forcing 4 costly battles and delaying the path to Rome, which necessitated the massive Operation Diadem in May 1944. The Gustav Line acted as a massive force multiplier. 15 German divisions held Allied forces along the near-impregnable positions, and elite Falseram utilized the elevation of the defense line for precise fire control. On March 15, 1944, hundreds of bombers destroyed the historic monastery. Rather than breaking the line, the ruins provided better defensive cover for the German paratroopers. The bombardment failed to dislodge defenders from their caves and subterranean passages. Strategically, the Gustav Line was highly efficient. By relying on natural terrain and available resources rather than massive new construction, it delayed the Allied advance for over 4 months. Rome was not liberated until June 4, 1944. Built not to hold territory, the defences of Weimar was the most effective fortification of World War II. It was here that the concept of defense evolved from mere delay into a weapon of supreme attrition. Under General Kobayashi's direction, the island was transformed into an underground battleship. He rejected traditional beachhead defenses and constructed a deep integrated system comprising 18 km of tunnels and at certain area reached 7 levels down. The defenses of Weimar were perfectly adapted for attrition. It wasn't just bunkers. It was a self-sustaining subterranean city with cisterns, barracks, and hospitals. The United States required airfields in Weimar for B-29 support against the Japanese mainland. And Kurabayashi's purpose was to inflict at least 10 American deaths for each Japanese soldier. Uema was the only battle where US casualties exceeded the number of Japanese defenders. Aided by volcanic sand, the 800 entrenched positions slowed the US advance. By effectively neutralizing a 5-1 force ratio, the subterranean network allowed a smaller force to fight with disproportionate power. Most of the core fortifications was protected by the deep volcanic rock and survived the initial bombardment, achieving a 1-1 US to Japanese casualty ratio. The defenses of Uema was exceptional. Planners projected that if Ujima's strategy was replicated on the Japanese mainland, it would cost more than 1 million casualties. Thank you for watching and see you in our next